UFC 297 was mediocre. It was an okay fight card. The undercard was actually very, very good. The main card, I don't think fully delivered. It was good. There were some good fights. If it was a fight night, it would have been great, but was it worth $79.99? I don't think so. Before you flood the comment section with, LOL, you paid for a pay-per-view. I mean, this is the sport that we love. I am going to pay for the pay-per-view. I'm going to support the sport that I love. I'm not going to be pirating links and watching big pay-per-views that I care about, some blurry, fuzzy feed that cuts in and out. That is nonsense. My name is Angelo. This is We Want Picks. I'm going to recap and react to UFC 297. But before I do, let me show you how well we did betting on UFC 297. I know Twitter and the rest of YouTube is just a wasteland of miserable bets where Mike Malott blew it up for you and Malcolm Gordon ruined your night. But luckily, we were able to avoid those landmines. Jacob and I put up several units of net profit, 31% combined ROI. That is return on investment, meaning not only did you get your original bet back, but then you got 31% profit on top of that. The reality is it was a tricky card and we did pretty well. Jacob's underdog lock of the week hit. That was Garrett Armfield. We'll talk about that fight in a minute. And my premium member-only safety parlay hit as well. I believe we're 8 in a row. If you do want to unlock that premium member parlay, we do one for every single event on every single card. You'll get all the picks, all the bets, the premium member parlay, tools, insight, information, and more. It is only $10 a month, and here are some results. Go back to last week, similar results. Go back to 296, similar results. This train is moving. WeWantPicks.com. Just click Become a Member at the top. I'm going to talk about a couple of fights. First of all, let's try to figure out who's a worse fighter, Jimmy Flick or Malcolm Gordon. They're both pretty terrible. Jimmy Flick has negative striking. Like, he literally hurts himself throwing, like, his striking is atrocious. How you end up in the UFC, this is like the last few months, there's been several fights where I have just been astonished by the level of talent. The Ultimate Fighting Championship is supposed to be the pinnacle of MMA fighting. It is supposed to be the NFL of MMA, the MLB of MMA. They're supposed to be the bar. And then like Bellator, PFL, they're supposed to be the Canadian Football League. They're supposed to be the XFL. But then we have fights like this. We have people like Jimmy Flick who are professional fighters fighting in the UFC. We have people like Malcolm Gordon who are under contract with the largest promotion in the world. It does not make sense to me. I broke down Molly McCann next week. It makes no sense to me, some of these people that end up in the UFC and end up with a whole bunch of fights and somewhat of a career. I feel like the talent is very tricky. We have like the creme de la creme at the top, and then we just have, regional fighters that somehow got the call up and are sticking around. I have a theory. I think it's because the UFC does a show a weekend. They're doing 50-something shows a year. Well, that would math doesn't work, but you get what I'm saying. And I think that's why they do that. But either way, this fight was fun to watch. And maybe that's why they keep these people on the roster. This fight was very fun to watch. It was back and forth. There was the phantom tap from Jimmy Flick, nice and early. I thought it was a tap, but luckily nobody else saw it because I was rooting hard against Malcolm Gordon. Not because I had money on Malcolm Gordon. I did pick Flick to win, but I have seen multiple people, regular people in the comment section, cappers. I have seen multiple people go all in on Malcolm Gordon for this event, and it made zero sense to me. I will never bet on that low level of a fighter at those odds. Malcolm Gordon was always the favorite. He was never an underdog. And people saw that. And they said, here is money that I've earned at my job. Here you go. I'm putting it on him to win. That will never make sense to me. And hopefully some people learned a lesson there. But honestly, it was a really fun fight. And Malcolm Gordon is actually a decent striker. So to answer the question, who's worse? Jimmy Flick is worse. He won the fight, but he's the worst fighter. Malcolm Gordon went out there, almost knocked out Jimmy Flick, basically submitted Jimmy Flick, and then he just gassed because he doesn't have good enough cardio. And again, how you're fighting at this level and don't have 15 full minutes of hard cardio is crazy to me. Cardio is the one thing that you can control. God's going to give you a chin. Some people are more athletic than others. Like there's levels to talent, and talent is not earned. Like, you just have talent. What you do with that talent is earned. But if we remove talent from all of these, getting tired and losing a fight because you got tired, that's just unacceptable. That being in shape to fight for 15 minutes is the bare minimum. That was a long rant for the very first fight to break down here. Let's talk about our girl, Jasudavicius. She's a savage. I love Jasmine Jasudavicius. I think I have picked her to win every single fight she's ever been in. Obviously, I was wrong against Tracy Cortez. I was wrong when she lost a couple of years ago to Natalia Silva, or last year, whenever that was. But Jasmine Jasudavicius is a bad bitch. She comes in here, she will throw down, she will shoot takedowns. She's got the neck of a wrestler, and she uses the wrestling well. I'm going to caveat that. I'm going to take a step back. Her wrestling is not as good as I would have hoped, because when we got to the third round and she started to get a little bit tired and started to slow down, her takedowns were a bit shoddy. Like, they were a very shoddy. Those were not like clean, boom, got the leg, let me just finish this off type takedown. So I think I do need to be careful betting on Jasmine in the future. We had this bet on her. I've bet on her in the past many, many times. I think if I'm going to know for a fact she's fighting somebody with pretty good takedown defense and excellent cardio, I probably have to work back a little bit and maybe lay off the bet, because I do love Jasmine. I think she's very good. I think she's going to beat up on a lot of people, as she did last night. She literally set records for the strike differential, the widest strike differential in a 3-round ever. A 3-round fight ever, and the 8th widest striking differential of all time. That includes 5-round fights. And she's 8th. That's how badly of a beating she delivered in this fight. Overall, I do love Jasmine. She does have high-level wrestling. She was a wrestler before she was a fighter. She's going to come in. She will strike. She will grind. She's not soft. And she could take a punch, because Priscilla Cachoeira cracked her more than one time, and Jasmine didn't care at all. But those takedown attempts in the third round were not good, and that needs to be something you remember going forward. Priscilla Cachoeira might literally be a zombie. Watching that fight, there was more than one time where I was like, she's about to quit. She's setting herself up to quit. She turned, she's covering, she's about to quit. She never quit. She took her beating, literally, statistically, the worst beating in the history of the UFC. There was a 10-7 round. A 10-7 round. I cannot think of another fight. I'm sure somebody in the comments will remind me. I cannot think of another fight where we saw a 10-7 round. This was literally the worst beating that we have ever seen in the UFC, and Priscilla Cachoeira did not quit. Obviously, she was submitted, so I guess she literally did. But you know what I'm saying. She could have turned her head, get easy TKO, and she didn't do that. She fought her ass off and tried her hardest. The Jillian Robertson situation. So Jillian Robertson, first of all, this was UFC 297. It was in Canada. And all I heard all week long, after I trashed Malcolm Gordon, after I said, I don't know if I would bet on your boy Charles Jourdain. I don't know if he's going to win this fight. After I said those two things, everybody was like, dude, this is UFC Canada, eh? Last UFC Canada, eh? All the Canadians won, bro. I don't know if Canadians say bro. Maple syrup. And that's not what happened this time. Every single Canadian male lost. The only Canadians that won were Jasmine Jasudavicius and Jillian Robertson. The ladies were the only Canadians that won. Not only did all the Canadian men lose, even the people the Canadians were rooting for lost. Arnold Allen, for some reason, they were carrying that flag, lost. Sean Strickland, lost. I mean, that arena got quiet towards the end of the night. I did feel bad, because the UFC did a lot of these matchups so that the Canadians would win. They set the Canadians up to succeed. Every single one of these matchups was a fight where a Canadian could have and probably should have won. The only one where the Canadian wasn't a favorite was the Chris Curtis fight. Outside of that, Canadians were favored and probably should have won every single one of those matchups. And they didn't. Jillian Robertson did, though, and she looked great. Listen, Jillian Robertson looked great. That very first takedown that she got was awesome. She got a single, boom. Like, she didn't even run a full pipe. She just took a half a step, bang, shoved the shoulder into that inside thigh, and just dropped Polyana Viana down to the ground and worked from there. But then the second round comes, and she's back on her feet. And her striking is absolutely atrocious. It is worse than I thought. I was nervous as hell watching that. Jillian was in the safety parlay. I was nervous as hell watching that thinking, oh my God, Polyana Viana is going to pull this off. She is, the striking difference between the two of them is astonishing. And Polyana, in my mind, I'm like, she's a good enough grappler to not just get submitted here. And she was a good enough grappler to avoid some stuff. She threatened with some of her own things. I believe she had a triangle attempt at one point, but then ultimately, you can see, unlike Priscilla Cachoeira, you can see Polyana Viana just sort of slowing down, starting to give up, like, all right, I'm not going to win this fight. And she accepted the fact that she wasn't going to win and then turned, and that's what happened. But Jillian Robertson will beat anybody she can take down for the most part, and she will lose to anybody with good takedown defense and good striking. If you can find a matchup where she's fighting somebody with good striking, Jillian Robertson's in a lot of trouble. But she continues to have the most finishes in this division, and good for her. Hard-fought win. She was in the safety parlay, so I'm happy she won that fight. This was absolutely fight of the night. Ramon Tavares, Siri Saidi. Ramon Tavares got the win. Jacob picked him. He was not Jacob's lock of the week. Jacob picked him to win. He lost this fight once before. They ran it back. The comment section was riddled with Siri Saidi's going to win. I saw bets all over the place where Siri Saidi was in parlays. This was another fight where we said, well, Jacob literally bet on Ramon Tavares. Jacob's a little riskier than I am. I'm much more conservative when it comes to spending my money. If I'm betting, trying to win these bets, I am not an odds chaser. I'm not just saying plus 800 and that could happen. That's not me. But a lot of people were betting money on Siri Saidi, and he was a good size favorite. He had already won this fight. He had knocked out Ramon Tavares, early stoppage, but he knocked out Ramon Tavares the first fight. So a lot of people just thought it was an easy addition to a parlay to make those odds better. And frankly, if Ramon Tavares lost this fight and Siri Saidi got the decision, I'm not going to scream and yell. I think it could have gone either way. This was a great fight. What I will say about Siri Saidi, he was the more dynamic striker in this matchup. He was throwing kicks. He was throwing punches. He was working forward. He was controlling the octagon. He actually looked good many moments. But Ramon Tavares was clearly the more powerful and effective striker. Ramon Tavares was landing almost everything he threw. Siri Saidi's throwing combinations. They look great, but Ramon Tavares bobbed and weaved and avoided 80% of those strikes. And then Ramon Tavares does not throw in combinations. He'll just throw one punch back, and that landed. Clearly more powerful. It looked like he dropped Siri Saidi. I don't know how many they credit him for, but he dropped Siri Saidi multiple times with that power. Split his face open, blood everywhere. And yes, he was not controlling the octagon because he was backing up. He was accepting the cage against his back, and that is a problem. But I do think the judges got this right. I think Ramon Tavares won because if I'm watching the fight objectively, I'm seeing a guy who's landing the better strikes, the more powerful strikes. His defense is better. Is he against the cage? Is the other guy marching forward? Sure. But one of these guys is dropping the other guy. One of these guys is bloodying up his face. One of these guys has good defense. One of these guys is landing at a much higher percentage, and I agreed with that decision. But what was interesting is none of the judges agreed with each other. We had a split decision, obviously, as we know. The first round is the only round that they agreed on. They gave Ramon Tavares the first round, and that was a pretty clear Ramon Tavares round. Blasted him a bunch of times, did some work. And then we have Derek Clearly who said, well, Siri Saidi won the next two rounds, which made no sense. I don't agree with that because then Siri Saidi's face exploded. Siri Saidi got dropped again, and a lot of stuff happened there. And the two judges that gave the fight to Ramon Tavares, they didn't even agree on which was the second round Ramon Tavares won. And this is not an indication of bad judging and this and that, none of that crap. And you can't even claim homer decisions. These judges did no favors for the Canadians. You would think they would take care of their countrymen. They did not. They did not. I actually think all of the judging was on point. And obviously, when a fight is razor thin, there's people, robbery, people are going to scream robbery left and right, and I get it. But it's a razor thin fight. And there's three people. It is what it is. That's how they try to spread it out. I thought this was the right decision. Super, super close. people screaming robbery on a razor-thin split decision, I don't think you understand how to use robbery or the context to use it in. Robbery is when there's clearly been a beating. Clearly somebody won this fight and it goes the other way. That's a robbery. A split decision that was in a razor-thin fight that went the way you didn't want it to, that's not a robbery. That's just like, it's a tough decision. So I think they got this right. Ramon Tavares, Siri Saidi, hopefully they both continue to get fights in the UFC. And I would predict Siri Saidi is going to have a better career than Ramon Tavares. That whole waiting, throwing one strike at a time, no combinations, that's the Chris Curtis approach. And yeah, Chris Curtis won his fight, and Chris Curtis has had some success. But we've seen Chris Curtis lose decisions. We've seen Chris Curtis get beat up, bullied. Forward pressure can give him problems. So I think Ramon Tavares is going to have problems with people who continue to march forward. With people like Siri Saidi who will march forward, put on volume, but not get hit as much. Those people will beat Ramon Tavares all day. Siri Saidi, his versatility in his strikes, his toughness, all of that was absolutely incredible. I think he's ultimately going to have the better career of these two. Sean Woodson and Charles Jourdain. This was a pretty good fight. Was it a barn burner? No, but it had its moments, and it was interesting to watch because Sean Woodson does not get enough credit. I picked Charles Jourdain to win. I said, I'm not betting on this fight. This is way too close of a fight, and way too many things can go wrong. But I thought that we were going to get Charles Jourdain with a little more versatility. Charles Jourdain could wrestle. Charles Jourdain's a little more dangerous, so he probably wins this fight. But don't bet on it. It could go too many different ways. And we just watched Sean Woodson out grapple a very good wrestler. And it was incredible to watch this fight because Charles Jourdain does what he does. He moved forward. He tried to win this fight. And you got to love the guy for that. And we all literally do. But Sean Woodson picked him apart on the feet. Sean Woodson had excellent takedown defense. Sean Woodson, for some ridiculous reason, tried to work his own takedowns. Sean Woodson looked fantastic. I mean, quite literally, he looks awkward as hell. It's crazy that that is a human being. It is crazy that that is a 145-pound human being. The body makes no sense. How is he that tall? How are his arms that long? How are his legs that long? How does he weigh that little? None of it makes any sense. So he doesn't like look amazing in a photo album, but he looked very, very good in that fight. And he's going to be a problem for a lot of people, and I feel like he's not getting the credit he deserves. He's basically beating everybody they're giving him. He's outboxing almost everybody. His takedown defense, because his legs are giraffe long, people can't take him down. Charles Jourdain was fully connected at one point, and it still didn't matter. Woodson just spread those wings, baby, and then worked out of it, and it just didn't matter. Sean Woodson is good. I'm curious to see who he gets next. I'm curious to see the line because Sean Woodson definitely can be a problem for a lot of these 145-pounders. We had Jacob's lock of the week. We had Garrett Armfield taking on Brad Katana. I think the judges got this one right as well. This is another fight where instantly robbery. It's not. This was a razor-thin fight. This was a good, close, busy fight. That's not a robbery if you don't agree with the decision. That was a close back-and-forth fight where they both had success. They both had their moments. I do think they got this right. I think Garrett Armfield won. I think he won 2 out of the 3 rounds, and I think he did that with pressure. I think he did that with his wrestling defense. I think he was landing the more powerful strikes. I think it was clear that Garrett Armfield was the one doing the damage and pushing the pace. Brad Katana had his moments. He had success with a couple of last-minute takedowns, and I was worried with a couple of those last-minute takedowns. I'm like, man. You know, I thought Garrett Armfield was winning this round, but that takedown right at the end there, the judges, I don't know what they're going to do with that. And I do think they got it right. I tend to favor wrestlers. We're going to talk about the main event. I tend to feel like if you get a takedown, okay, that was a close round. You got a takedown, that wins the round. I do tend to feel that way. I do recognize, though, that's just not how the sport is today. I've been watching since UFC 1. I've seen every single UFC ever. We used to go to my cousin's house, watch him on the D-Scrambler. After I gave you that anti-piracy speech to open up this video. Yes, in the 90s, we'd go to my cousin's house and watch it on a D-Scrambler. Now that I'm an adult, I pay the money and I watch the pay-per-views to support the sport that we love so much. Either way, back to this. Back then, takedowns meant everything. Now it feels like judges don't care about takedowns at all. In Canada, it was a little different than Vegas, but I do feel like, Brad had success in the grappling. He had a couple of takedowns that were very well timed, but Garrett Armfield seemed to be the one moving forward. He seemed to be the one landing the more meaningful strikes. He was defending plenty of takedowns. And you know how that goes. Somebody shoots some takedowns and they're getting stuffed. Then they shoot another one. It almost makes them look desperate. It almost gives this false aura of, well, I'm losing all these striking exchanges and now I'm just diving at legs and he keeps stuffing my head, but I got to keep shooting. And I feel like that's what the refs were seeing. They're like, well, this guy's getting hit so hard, he's shooting takedowns. And he looks a little desperate, and he's not getting all these takedowns. So I think they got this call right. I think Garrett Armfield won this fight, but we were nervous. We didn't know what we were going to get. This is Jacob's live reaction while they were announcing the winner of his Lock of the Week.
Never a fucking doubt. Let's see those slips, baby.
We had Granby Rolls coming out of Arnold Allen. If you're not a wrestler, you don't know what Granby Roll is. You basically roll over your shoulders, launch your body, and when you're in a wrestling match and you're on bottom, you do that. The hope is the person on top can't follow you, and now you're out. You've got your 1 point to escape. You're out. You're free. You can work takedowns. You can do whatever you want to do. You don't see it too often in MMA fights. And Arnold Allen was just Granby rolling his ass off. That was like 5 or 6 different rolls. The problem is, while those were very good, very well-timed Granby rolls that were out of nowhere and would have shook 90% of the fighters in this division, Movsar Evloev is a different animal. He doesn't have great control, but he'll follow you. No problem. He rolled through those Granbys, every single one of them. I thought Movsar Evloev looked great in this fight. It was an absolute mauling. Obviously, we had those wild illegal knees from Arnold Allen. Those were illegal. I don't know how anybody was defending that they were not illegal. Like, hand was on the ground. And even if the fingers came up 1/100th of a millisecond right before that knee hit him in the head. Come on, that's an illegal knee. You threw it when he very clearly, come on, that was an illegal knee. And there was 4 of them. And then one of them split Evloev's head wide open, and the ref didn't take a point. And I don't think it would have mattered because we were in the 3rd round, and Arnold Allen needed to finish no matter what, so taking a point didn't really matter there. But I thought this was a great win for Movsar Evloev because it wasn't easy. Arnold Allen made him work. Stuffed a few takedowns, worked his ass off on the ground, landed some powerful strikes on the feet. Movsar dropped Arnold Allen. Literally the most meaningful strike that wasn't illegal in the fight came from Movsar because he blasted Arnold and Arnold went pookoop. But Arnold Allen gave him a go. Arnold Allen was incredibly tough. It wasn't just fake jiu-jitsu Diego Lopez tough. And that's not a slight to Diego Lopez. I guess what I'm saying there is, and I shouldn't use the word fake, what I'm saying there is, when he fought Diego Lopez, working your way out of a submission is very different than, I might get my head knocked off. And Arnold Allen gave him that look. So great performance by Arnold Allen. He showed up. He fought his ass off. He tried. I don't know what adjustments, if I go back to my corner and I'm Arnold Allen, I don't know what adjustments they make. It's like, dude, you're just getting out wrestled by a guy that's wrestled his whole life. And yeah, he's out striking you a little bit. But I get it because you're trying to defend the takedown. So it is what it is. The better fighter won. He was clearly the better fighter. He was the odds-on favorite for a reason. He was in the safety parlay for a reason. But I do think Arnold Allen fought well. Hopefully you didn't bet on him because fighting well doesn't get you your money back. But I don't know if Arnold Allen's stock drops that much with that loss because he lost to an upper echelon guy with phenomenal wrestling. Movsar Evloev, though, it'll be very interesting to see who he gets next. I want to see him fight a very good wrestler. I want to see what it looks like when he's the one getting shot on, when he's the one backing up, and he's the one defending takedowns. That will be interesting, and we'll see what we get next there. And we had Neil Magny with the veteran savvy. This might be one of the most come-from-behind victories we've ever seen. This is one of the wildest upsets I can remember off the top of my head. Mike Malott was very clearly beating Neil Magny. 2 rounds down, no problem. 90% of the 3rd round down, no problem. No problem. But the second that Mike Malott went from hammer to nail, that was the end of it. That was the end of it. And it's crazy because we were watching that fight. And I was like, all right, nice. Now we see Mike Malott. I'm glad he didn't just steamroll Neil Magny. Look at him. He's got cardio. It's the third round. He's still pushing. He's in shape. We know he can go 3 rounds. This guy is not Gabriel Bonfim. And then he makes a mistake. Neil Magny ends up on top. And Mike Malott just could not get out. Had nothing off it. Oh, here's a heel hook. And didn't get the heel hook. Well, I guess that's it. And it's crazy to see that. And obviously, he's in a fist fight. It's exhausting. He's getting beat on from top. But 20 seconds left. He just had to survive for 20 seconds. And it's not like it's a submission, right? If you are out of breath and somebody is strangling you and you can't breathe, you already couldn't have breathed for 40 seconds. It's like 20 more seconds. A submission is very different. Holding onto an arm bar, your arm might snap in half. That is very different than this situation. 20 seconds. Throw your hips out. Kick your legs out. Move your head. Move your body. Do a push-up. Literally anything. It's 20 seconds. Any movement, and that referee was not going to stop it. But things didn't go his way. He was getting beat on. He was obviously exhausted. Neil Magny has all the veteran savvy in the world, and this is where experience matters. This is where experience matters. Because Neil Magny having world-class opponents, Neil Magny being in every horrible situation you could have ever been in your career, Neil Magny fighting some of the best people that have ever walked the face of this earth, brought all of that with him and never quit on himself. He was clearly losing that fight. He was not going to win a decision anywhere. And he didn't quit on himself. He continued to work. He had an opening, and he ran with it. Good for Neil Magny. Obviously, Mike Malott's stock is going to drop quite a bit here. We'll see what he gets next. I do think he's still very talented, and maybe he needed this loss. Maybe he needed the loss. Here's a reminder. You're not there just yet. He's 32, so you got to get there pretty quick. But here's a reminder. You still have some learning to do. The co-main event of the evening. I will die on this hill. First of all, I picked Rocky. I'm happy. I cashed that bet. I bet over 4.5 as well. Cashed that. So I made all the money on this fight. And maybe that's skewing this view, but I don't think so. I don't think this was that bad of a fight. The internet seems to think this was the worst fight in history. The internet is comparing this fight to Rose Namajunas versus Carla Esparza 2, which quite literally was the worst fight in the history of MMA. Not just UFC, not just women, the history of MMA. That was the worst fight that has ever existed. To compare this fight to that is crazy. It's crazy. We had back and forth. We had rounds going to different people. Mayra Bueno Silva looked great, had takedowns. Raquel Pennington looked great, was winning the striking exchanges, but then would grapple, would make a mistake. We had really tight submissions on both sides. I thought this was a good back and forth fight. Was it amazing? Would I have preferred that I didn't pay for it? Sure. But people talking about this is the worst fight they've ever seen is crazy. One of the Barstool guys that I love, Johnny Mack, he did a whole video saying it's the worst fight he's ever seen. I disagree. Here's some stats. The left is what is objectively the worst fight in the history of time. Everybody agrees this is the worst fight that has ever existed. This was a 5-round fight. Rose Namajunas landed 38 total strikes. 38 strikes in 25 minutes. Carla Esparza landed 30 strikes in 25 minutes. That is what the worst fight in history looks like. Raquel Pennington landed 265 strikes. Mayra Bueno Silva, 96. Like, these numbers are not the same. 3 takedowns total in the Rose Esparza fight. 4 takedowns in last night's fight. 5 submission attempts in last night's fight. 0 submission attempts in the Rose Namajunas fight. These are not the same fight. I thought Raquel Pennington versus Mayra Bueno Silva was a decent fight. With that being said, this division has no talent left. The fact that Raquel Pennington is the best fighter on planet Earth at this weight class is crazy. It's crazy. It's crazy. Crazy. All the talent of this division is gone. Amanda Nunes just beat the talent out of everybody in this division. It's gone. Are we calling out the Venezuelan vixen? Who wants to see that fight? I don't want to see that fight. I don't want to see that fight. And knowing Amanda Nunes beat the absolute shit out of her, And now we're going to watch her fight Raquel Pennington and maybe win. It's like, what are we doing here? So they got to find new talent in this division to spark the interest, get things exciting, bring somebody in that's, I don't know, from the outside that scoops somebody up from PFL, something. They do need to bring some new talent into this division because it will die without the Amanda Nunes aura around it. And then we have the main event. Was this a robbery? I don't think so. I think they got it right. And I know a lot of people don't, and it's controversial and this and that. Again, the word robbery, everybody's using it wrong in my opinion, but this is the only fight where I could at least entertain the logic. Most people, the consensus seems to be, it was 2-2, and Dana White said this, and Dana White says anything, and people were like, oh, he said. It was 2-2 going into the fifth. Sean Strickland clearly won the fifth. That is a true statement. I don't think it was 2-2 going into the fifth. I do think Sean Strickland won the fifth. I think Sean Strickland won the first and the fifth, and I think he lost the 3 in the middle. That is my opinion. A lot of people feel that Sean Strickland won the first, the second, and the fifth. That seems to be the overall majority of people who think it was a robbery, think that Sean Strickland won 1, 2, and 5. I don't know how Sean Strickland won 2. I thought the striking was almost non-existent, and then Dricus had those phenomenal takedowns in that round. I think that was the difference there. The striking was even, if not leaning Dricus, and then Dricus had the takedowns. And then Dricus split open Sean Strickland's face. And then Dricus was constantly moving forward. Sean Strickland had very good success early in that first round with the jab. Dricus's eyes was almost rocky closed. Literally cut me Mick, I can't see. And then Sean abandoned the jab. Sean would have won this fight. If he just kept throwing the jab out there, he would have won this fight. Dricus du Plessis is not that good. As far as technique is concerned, he's not that good. Sean was the better, more technical striker. Dricus just kept bombing overhands, ducking his head and bombing overhands. But Sean didn't stay in his face. Sean wasn't moving forward. Dricus du Plessis moved forward, got Sean out of rhythm, and won this fight. When Sean Strickland can move forward, Sean Strickland can beat almost anybody. When he's not moving forward, we saw it with the Janet Cannonier fight. Thank you, web guy Josh, for reminding me of that. When Sean Strickland is not moving forward, he struggles. He doesn't do as well backing up as he does moving forward. And Dricus du Plessis does not back up. He marched forward, throwing bombs, regardless of how sloppy they are. He's throwing bombs. He's shooting takedowns. He's staying in your face. He's not the more technically sound fighter, but he is the more aggressive fighter. He is the more determined fighter. He just continued to move forward, and I think that's what won him this fight. I think Dricus won 2, 3, and 4. I think he lost the first round, a close round. He definitely lost the fifth round. And I think 2, the takedown did it. 3 and 4, he just clearly won those rounds. Most people seem to agree that he won 3 and 4. It comes down to round 2. I don't see how Dricus didn't win round 2. The judges, they also were a little bit all over the place. Round 1, everybody agrees Sean Strickland won. Round 5, everybody agrees Sean Strickland won. And I think everybody on both sides of this agree with those statements. It looks like Derek Cleary and Eric Colon agree with me that 2, 3, and 4 go to Dricus. Everybody agrees the second round goes to Dricus. So I don't know why I'm seeing so many tweets. I don't know why I'm hearing so many people say that Sean Strickland won the second round. I don't think that. The judges didn't think that. But overall, it was a good fight. It was a good fight because it was tense. Was it the amazing fight? We're going to try to kill each other out there. No, that's not what happened. But it was a very tense fight. You were on the edge of your seat. It came down to the decision. It was a split decision. I love that. I love not knowing, like a good back and forth fight, and then you're just waiting for the judges, like, what are we going to get here? I love that. I had no money on this fight at all, except the over 1.5, which that was the most obvious bet on this card. Cruised right past that. Either way, very good fight. Let me know in the comments. I know most of you are split right down the middle who you think won, but I thought it was a good fight. I do not think it was a great main card. $79.99 to answer the original question that opened this video up. No, I don't think this was worth $80. I don't know if we have to start holding the UFC accountable, honestly, as crazy as that sounds. We may have to start holding them accountable and say, hey, this card sucks. We just watched Abu Dhabi. No, not Abu Dhabi. Saudi Arabia just told them, this card sucks. You're not bringing this card over here. If I'm paying for a card, which Saudi Arabia does, Abu Dhabi does, they pay the entire bill for they pay the UFC to bring the card. Here's $100 million, do a card over here. And Saudi Arabia paid for a card. The UFC put it together. It's supposed to happen in a couple of months. And they were like, this card sucks. I'm not paying for this. This is not good. And the UFC said, okay. They moved it to the Apex. That's how little the UFC felt about that card. And they're doing another card in Saudi Arabia later in the year, probably a better one. Us as fans might have to do that. And what happens when we get the UFC Canada card, when we get the UFC Brazil, actually UFC Brazil usually ends up being pretty good, but when we get these regional cards like that, the UFC knows for a fact they're going to sell out the arena. They'll do one really good fight, they'll sell out the arena, they'll make all their money. That's kind of what happened here. The undercard delivered, the main card, I don't think it did. Either way, guys, thanks so much. Let me know your opinions of all of these fights in the comments section. If you're not a premium member, become one. It's only $10 a month. All of our picks, half the bets, and whatever we can do right now for UFC Vegas 85 is up, ready to go. You can check that out instantly. Just go to WeWantPicks.com, click Become a Member. It's only $10 a month, and one of the things you will unlock is the safety parlay. This is a parlay that I personally put up for every single UFC card. It hits at a 70% win rate. The ROI over a year and a half is 29%. In the most volatile betting sport in history, we have hit 8 of the last 9. WeWantPicks.com, click Become a Member. You're going to get far more than just bets. You're going to get tools, data, and insight like the detailed data, metrics, and analytics. 38 columns of information to help you find your spots, to help you scare you away from spots that you should not be betting on. You're going to get the line movement tracker, opening odds, current odds, win probability, and line movement for every single fighter on every single card. You're going to get far more than just me. You're going to get more than just me and Jacob. You're going to get the MMA Minute. He is an analyst giving you his picks, his bets, his round line leans, and his insight. You're going to get Running Mouth MMA. There are 3 of them giving you picks, bets, round line leans, insights. You're going to get Artem breaking down far more than just UFC. I will only ever break down UFC. Artem's going to be breaking down PFL, Bellator, Road to the UFC tournaments. He's breaking down all of that stuff for you. And then the Pick Doctor has developed an AI picking fights based solely off of historical data. WeWantPicks.com. Click Become a Member. It is only $10 a month.